All right. Top of the morning, top of the evening, top of the night, whatever time zone you are on. Happy ML King Day, a moment of silence for all those who have lost their lives. With that being said, let's remember this. If we can look up, we can get up. If we can go get up, we can go up. Continue the fight of faith for justice until we pursue and recover all. Having said that, ML King Day, you know what it is. Let's go. Let's get started for real freedom fighters, real advocates, real justice seekers. Okay.
The higher you feel your barrier, the taller I become. The further you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your back away. No matter what, something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. I can make it. Something I'm proud of. Something I'm proud of. Something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. Before you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. Your love will not come. Oh, yes, it will. Deny my place in time to squander. Well, that's my.
Y'all better sing. Yes. Hey, sing the song.
I don't want to be bad. You're doing me wrong. You're doing me wrong. You thought it was gone. Something inside so strong. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Brothers and sisters, yeah. When they insist that you're not good enough. Just look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah. Hey, Sue. All right. Y'all better sing. I'm getting ready to get up and run around this bed now. Y'all sing it. Woo! Come on, Vanessa. Put your weight on this song. Ah. Go ahead and snatch the atmosphere. Ah. Yeah. Go ahead, sing the song now, y'all. That's right. Oh my goodness. Come on, sing the song, y'all. Woo! Well, happy ML King Day today. I gotta pull that back. There's something inside so strong. Hold on, be strong. There is something inside so strong. The higher you build your barriers, the louder we will sing. Oh my goodness. Happy ML King Day today. Let me pull that back and shift the atmosphere real quick. The stratosphere, the hemisphere. Ah. Let the airwaves get this tonight. People singing with some real authority up in here tonight. Woo! Penetrate the airwaves in the atmosphere with some authority up in here tonight. Let me pull it back. This is the way we getting down tonight on ML King Day. I gotta pull it back. Let's go. When there's something inside so strong, you know that you can make it, even though others, circumstances, situations have done you wrong, and you know they wrong, and but there's something inside so strong. If you can look up, I can get up. And if I can get up, I can go up in spite of what everybody else is doing around me. Come on, somebody. Let me play this back. When the down seems down and the up seems down, but you know you got a revelation on the inside of you. You got something inside you that's so strong, it's unshakable. Ooh, ML King. Happy ML King night tonight. Let's go.
I think that our history should be just like any other history.
The higher you feel your barrier, the taller I'll become. The further you take my rights away, the faster I will.
We on the run because you're trying to take our rights.
You can't deny me. You can decide to turn your back away. No matter what.
If you know you got something on the inside of you that's stronger than every circumstance and situation, you understand this song tonight. Come on, y'all.
The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will be. Your love will not come. So yes, deny my place in time. You squander wealth that's mine.
Sing the song. No, they didn't squander wealth that was mine. Come on.
Something inside so strong. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Howard Hewitt, you better sing that song. Put your weight on that, Yolanda. Come on, Vanessa. I'm not trying to be funny, but he snatched your oxygen out the air on them runs right there. And if you say he didn't, I'm going to say you're not telling the truth. Woo! Let's get to this MLK. Oh, my. Something inside so strong tonight. Soup Ball, how you doing? 3,000 Bushes, how y'all doing? Happy ML King Day. It's something inside so strong. And taking authority over the atmosphere like that with one vocals will make you want to get up and be about it. Woo! All right. Let's get off into what we here for. We here for a man of valor. MLK, Martin Luther King. You know what it is. Know what it is. Real truth, justice seeker, real humanitarian, a real humanitarian, real advocate for people, real social justice sergeant. Let's call him the general. Real social justice general, like none other. Martin Luther King. Who understood that we in America and we can't we outnumbered. That's what he understood. We was outnumbered. And that's why when he got to the South and people say, oh, well, he was about nonviolence. No. Understand. When he got to the South, he had to go with the strategies they was rocking with in the South, because he didn't want to sacrifice another generation of people. Selah, pause and think about it. Yeah. All right. Let me make sure this video is queued up in the background. Ooh.
Solid.
Their
problems are very real, and they've got organized to grapple with them, becoming much more visible.
I'm gonna start right here. Now I'm queuing this video up in the background. It's 26 minutes and 50 seconds. So I'm queuing it right. Right where I want to start it at. And I will, when I edit this, I will leave the link in the description below. Okay. This is one of the many 11 months before he was assassinated, and he did an interview on NBC News. So that is this one. Okay. I think I'm where I want to be on this. Let me share out. Oh my, what a joy. What a joy. Mm-hmm. People have often misinterpreted what he said. But right 3000. Oh, I'm doing good, Soup. Thanks for asking. During that era, they did understand how to get down and how to mobilize and how to stay actively engaged. This generation, we've become complacent. And as Martin Luther King would say, many times when some of us cross the water and get to the other side, we forget about the generation that helped us to get there. And we forget that we are still rich and melanated. And we forget. It's a whole bunch of stuff we forget. But let him say it, because can't nobody say it like he said it when he was alive but himself. We can quote him, but it's the passion and the authority that he spoke with when he was alive. Let me do the share on this. Soup Bone, in this generation, I would dare say many of us aren't comprehending and understanding But they got it, because if they didn't get it, we wouldn't be sitting our backsides where we sitting at today. And that's just the reality of the situation. We just have to let the record show. Come on, ML.
South, particularly in Alabama, you had visible villains: Jim Clark, Bull Connor, cattle prods, police dogs. But in the North, you don't have those visible villains. Isn't it hard to get your people aroused and directed at something that isn't visible?
Well, that's exactly right. And this is what I was saying when I said it's harder to see a target. In the South, in the nonviolent movement, we were aided always, on the whole, by the brutality of our opponent. It isn't the same way in the North. The other thing is that you don't have legal segregation in the North as you do in the South. So it is much more difficult to get people to see exactly what you're doing, but it isn't an impossible job. It's a hard, it's a tedious job at times to get people to be aroused from their apathetic slumbers, but I still feel that Negroes in the North can be motivated just as they were motivated in the South. And I think as time goes on, with the growing economic deprivation in the Negro community, it will even be easier, because people will come to see that not only is something wrong in general, but something is wrong in particular in their own economic and housing situations.
Well, what is it? I mean, how do you find it? It's very subtle in the North, is it not?
It's subtle, but it's becoming much more visible. Anybody can see that the schools are more segregated in the North today than they were in 1954, when the Supreme Court rendered its decision declaring segregation unconstitutional. Anybody can look around the ghetto and see that ghetto schools are predominantly segregated and devoid of quality. Anyone who moves through a major ghetto of our country will see the housing conditions. People don't have to be reminded that they are forced to live in slums in many instances, and they're often rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. And it isn't too hard to see the exploitation that the Negro confronts in the ghetto, where he is forced to pay more for less and constantly trying to make ends meet, but because of either no job as a result of unemployment, or a job that is so economically unprofitable that the person can't make ends meet. And I think they see all of these things, and more they are coming to see them, because before, the people of the North were looking to the South and they supported the struggles of the South. Now they are coming to see that their problems are very real and they've got organized to grapple with them.
Was there something hypocritical about the fact that the South existed and the North could point the finger? And then when the Civil Rights Acts were passed in the early 60s, you couldn't point the finger anymore?
Well, there was no doubt about the hypocrisy of large segments of the nation on the whole question of racial equality. I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in 64 and even 65 of the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And
are we not here today, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate who refused to vote for Voting Right Act? And this was in the 60s. Are we not here today? Mm-hmm. The games that elected officials will play.
And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.
But isn't that part of the dilemma now? that people knew that Negroes were being denied
they
what
from
was
South.
guaranteed to them by the Constitution, by the fact that they were citizens of this country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, now it's up to them?
Well, I think the dilemma is much deeper, and I think one during this period of transition has to be very honest with America. And honesty impels me to admit that America has broad racist elements still alive. Racism is still existing in American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality. I think we have to see that vacillation has always existed, ambivalence has always existed, and this to me is the so-called white backlash. It's merely a new name for an old phenomenon. I see the white backlash as a continuation of the same ambivalence and vacillation of white America on the whole question of racial justice that has existed since the founding of our nation. I think the other thing that we must see at this time is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we're getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to...
Woo! Pause for a minute, because all of that was loaded. Are we not still here today? Do those words still not ring true today? They don't want to talk about no real equality. The vacillating. Yeah, vacillating is when you go back and forth and back. It's like you're wavering back and forth, like the wind on the sea would cause a ship to go back and forth and back and forth. Oh my goodness. Let me pull that back, and my ink pen ran out, but thank goodness for the playback. I don't care how many times I've listened to this, can always learn something. That's when real men of valor speak. Their words will live on forever. And you can eat off of them for a lifetime. Knowledge. Let me pull this back some.
I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in '64 and even '65 with the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.
But isn't that part of the dilemma now? That people knew that Negroes were being denied what was guaranteed to them by the Constitution, by the fact that they were citizens of this country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, Now it's up to them?
Well, I think the dilemma is much deeper, and I think one during this period of transition has to be very honest with America. And honesty impels me to admit that America has broad racist elements still alive. Racism is still existing in American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality. I think we have to see that vacillation has always existed, ambivalence has always existed, and this
my.
so-called white backlash is merely a new name for an old phenomenon. I see the white backlash as a continuation of the same ambivalence and vacillation of white America on the whole question of racial justice that has existed since the founding of our nation. I think the other thing that we must see at this time is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we are getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
Do you think white people in this country, and I'm talking about non-segregationists, people devoid or thinking they're devoid of racism, do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that I think they're in a very small minority. I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality. And they are always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
That's a part of it. And that grows out of something else.
Put your weight on this.
You can't thingify anything.
Come on.
Without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize.
Hold on for a minute, because I'm saying put your weight on it. Let me pull this back and be quiet. Because he's saying right here, speak the power to the truth. You can thingify anything. Oh my goodness. One of the most hated men during the time that he lived. A man of valor. When he opened up his mouth, he spoke with authority. Full of faith. Knowing that he probably would never see the things that he was out there fighting for come to pass in his lifetime. But to launch a next generation, fortitude, to fortify. Oh my goodness. Hmm. Okay. Let me calm myself down and be quiet.
I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality, and they are always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
That's a part of it, and that grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here and changed, treated in very inhuman fashion. And this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma, and that can never be overlooked. So I think these things.
And to this day, it still can't be overlooked. That's why you still have police brutality, and they still out there hunting African American people like they animals. And that's the reality of the situation. And if anybody says non-existent in America, they need to open up their eyes and they need a revelation and they need to get out of denial, because we can't have a conversation if you're going to stay in denial and not deal in the realm of reality. We need you to touch now. We need some of y'all to touch now and back to the realm of reality and start dealing, because we will never arrive to any concrete solution with people who don't want to deal in the realm of reality. They are still in deflection, in denial land. Oh, you better put your weight on that. A man of valor who words live on and still ring true to this day. The justification for slavery. How? No other ethnic group, none, no, not one, has gone through what the African American ethnic group have gone through here in America. Let the record show. Let me pull it back. You pull it back. Go ahead and speak truth. Oh my goodness.
The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here and changed, treated in very inhuman fashion. And this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma, and that can never be overlooked. So I think these things are absolutely necessary. The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land, nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Apart from wanting to live better, which all of us want to do.
Let me pause right here before he get to the next question. And I need people to remember, if you are African American, if you don't know, let me clue you in. Your ancestors, my great-grandparents, my great-great-great-grandparents, and some of my grandparents and greats of the grandparents, great aunts, great uncles paid into a system that they never got to partake of. And people want to talk about social services. Let me make this plain and clear. My ancestors paid into a system because remember, there's a time and point where African American people could not receive what they deem today's social services or whatever they want to call it, because they keep changing the name years ago, but they paid into the system. They paid their taxes, and then they were told they could only stay at a certain side of the street, can only eat at certain places, could only shop at certain places. Yeah, money was taken. They played into a system that they never got to partake of, but they took the money. Recompense. A man of valor, Martin Luther King, his words live on. The fight don't stop. Are we there yet? No. Let me ask the question again. Are we there yet? No. Come on, Martin.
To raise one's children in a better way, to be better. Does the Negro in America know what he wants to be?
I'm convinced that almost every Negro in this country, other than those who have been so scarred by the system that they've become pathological in the process, and we all have to battle with pathology. Nobody really knows what it means to be a Negro unless one can really experience it. And I know we all have to battle with this constant drain of a feeling of nobodiness. But in spite of this, I think the vast majority of Negroes in this country know that they want to be people. They want to be men. They want equality, period. It just boils down to that. And we haven't been able to be people. We haven't been men because of all of the conditions that we've lived with and the syndrome of deprivation surrounding conditions, whether it's in housing, in the economic area, or in schools, or in the vicious credit practices that we face in the ghetto, and all of the problems of closed doors and constant defeats. But in spite of all this, I think we all know, basically, that we want to be men. We want to be persons judged not on the basis of the color of our skin, but on the basis of the content of our character.
But you know that many young Negroes don't want anything that smacks of the American white middle class. But do they want something that smacks of whatever is the black middle class? Or do they just not want bourgeois values, which after all, the basis of this democracy?
Well, I think we have to see what they are saying. I would be the first to agree that integration does not mean giving up everything that has an Afro-American taint, so to speak, a background. I think there are certain unique things within any culture and certain cultural patterns that when you get to the process of amalgamation can really lift the whole culture. And it seems to me that integration at its best is the opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. I think the other thing that we've got to see is that these young people are saying that there must be a revolution of values in our country. As Jimmy Baldwin said on one occasion, what advantage is there in being integrated into a burning house?
None.
And I feel that there is a need for a revolution of values in America, because some of the values that presently exist are certainly out of line with the values and the idealistic structure that brought our nation into being. Unfortunately, we haven't been true to these ideals. And many of the values of so-called white middle-class society are values that need to be reviewed and re-evaluated, and in a real sense, they need to be changed. So I think the young people in the Negro community who are raising these questions are raising some very profound questions about our total society. In other words, they are saying that there must be a restructuring of the architecture of our society where values are concerned. And with this, I would agree with. So in the quest for integration, I think we can offer our whole nation something, because there are three evils in our nation. It's not only racism, but economic exploitation of poverty would be one, and then militarism. And I think in a sense, and in a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together. We aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood on the Lincoln Memorial that day in August, '63, and you said, "I had a dream," did that dream envision that you could see a war in Asia preventing the federal government doing for the Negroes, preventing the society doing for the Negroes, that which you think had to be done?
No, I didn't envision that then. I must confess that that period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others all across the nation, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And in 1954, which was, 64, 1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation.
Dr. King, even if there had not been a war in Asia, would you still not have had this nightmare insofar as the Negro movement for equality then touched on two things that the white community holds sacred: their children and their property?
Oh, I have no doubt that we would have encountered great difficulties, great problems of resistance if the war had not been in existence. So that I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended. But I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. I noticed the other day, some weeks ago, a Negro was shot down in Chicago, and it was a clear case of police brutality. That was on page 30 of the paper, but on page 1 at the top was 780 Viet Cong killed. That is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence. And it strengthened the military-industrial complex of our country, and it's made our job much more difficult, because I think we can go along with some programs, if we didn't have this war on our hands, that would cause people to adjust to new developments, just as they did in the South. They said they'd never ride the bus with us, blood would flow in the streets, they wouldn't go to school, and all of these things. But when people came to see that they had to do it because the law insisted, they finally adjusted. And I think white people all over this country will adjust once the nation makes it clear that in schools and housing, we've got to learn to live together as brothers. I think the biggest problem now is that we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rates, so to speak. It didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. Now we are confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance. They may put it on many other things, but we can't get rid of slums and poverty without it costing the nation something.
Reparations. It's going to cost the United States of America a whole lot of something. America don't want to do that work. That's what he's saying, and it's still true today. If it's going to cost you something, y'all don't want to pay back reparations. Let's do the math. If the land that was tilled and cultivated was returned, it would cost America something. Let's do the math. If interest was paid on our ancestors who were sold on the stock market like an item or a thing, it would cost the nation something. Let's do the math. Cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, the tilling of the grounds. If America was to pay that back with interest for every last one of our ancestors who worked and labored for free, it would cost America something. If America were to pay back with interest our ancestors who paid into a system of social services, Social Security, taxes, anything that they never got to partake of and we got it back with interest, it would cost America something. Yeah, a man of valor, ML King. Words still live on, still ring true. And the fact of the matter is, he's right. Some white Americans only want to go so far. He said, yeah, it's some out there that's true to the cause, and we know it is. And then there's some that's only willing to go so far. That's why you can turn around and have a Congress divided on an insurrection. That's why you can turn around and have a Congress, some senators with they stank behinds sitting up there vacillating over voting rights. He put his weight on that. Like Martin Luther King would say, yeah, let yeah, a real man of valor. And so it wasn't just speeches he was giving. It was knowledge he was kicking down. Some didn't get it. To this day, some got it and some didn't get it. Why they want to run around and scream, we're for Martin, we're for Martin. Do you really stand for Martin Luther King? Because if they really were standing for Martin Luther King, they would put their legislation where their mouth was. Put the legislation on it. To every House representative and to every senator. Show mouth. Put the legislation where your mouth is. That means reparations. Run it. That means human rights. Run it. Yeah. People want to talk. Anybody can talk a good game. But when it comes to that action, what you gonna do? Be tripping me out.
Martin Luther King, we had a conversation a couple days ago.
Too loud. Break this down some.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land.
Okay.
Through an act of
Break this volume down some. All right, here we go. And I play this one almost every year. Minimize that. Do the share on this. People start checking out when you start talking about justice and reparations for real. Some people can talk a good game, but they ain't about running up on the House and the Senate and shutting them voting sessions down until they pass it. And I'm not talking about participating in sedition, and I'm not talking about participating in an insurrection. I'm talking about participating in justice. Come on, ML King, man of valor.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
And we still waiting on that check. He straight up walked through there on that.
Distinguished guest, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and a sound blueprint. And I want to suggest, yes, you should know this because it's in your own city. From a poverty, Washington carved to carve for himself an imperishable niche in the annals of science. There was a star in the diplomatic sky. And
Okay. Now, let me pull the one up that everybody loves, but it probably went over a lot of people's head. And that is, I Have a Dream. And he first did that dream speech in Detroit, Michigan. That's where he first did that one at. Although many other people think it was done somewhere else first. But just let the record show it was done in Detroit first. That's why it's important to know history and not his story. A story somebody telling.
On a hot day in August 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington served as a massive push for economic debut on the national stage.
Okay, I don't need this person in the background because this person. Why is it? Okay, this is not the one I want to listen to. I'm pulling up the other one. Usually, I have all these things put up in the background, but that person. Okay. This is when they were in Washington, D.C. So the speech that was initially done in Detroit, Michigan, the one that they labeled I Have a Dream. Yeah. All right. Let me blow this screen up.
Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
Oh my.
100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned.
Yes, they have.
Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. Check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
Insufficient funds on all them promises written on paper and in ink, etched in ink, America.
But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
We still fighting for justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.
And unfortunately, in America, they like to take the drug of gradualism, especially up there Congress? Why are we still trying to pontificate about reparations? And then you get a sphere of Boule African American descendants who think that they have arrived because they were the first. Like Martin Luther King said, what is all this mess about being the first African American to do that, the first African American to do this? That's divisive in and of itself. Commendable over here in America because of the plight of the African Americans and our ancestors, but still divisive. Very divisive. Let me say it right, divisive. Yeah. I'm one of them Americans that want that check that my ancestors never got. How about that? Gradualism. We're going to gradually do this. When I watched them write other nations checks on a dime, money on a dime, in the name of bills and legislation that didn't benefit nobody but big business. Oh, let me use my best slangonomics tonight. Come on, Martin Luther King, man of valor, speak on it. And you ain't even here no more. Your words still ring true.
Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until that is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual.
And they return to business as usual.
There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation.
And that's what's happening.
Until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied
Never.
as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
And it's still happening.
We can never be satisfied as long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as
The signs don't say that no more, but you let the police show up in certain areas, they gonna make you aware that the stigma of that racism in America is still prevalent. Still very much prevalent.
as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which
Come
to vote.
on! For the people who don't vote, it don't matter. Let me pull that back. Let me pull that back because there's still a lot of black people out here talking about they ain't gonna vote because they ain't got nothing which to vote for. Yeah, and they all this and that. Well, then you run for the office. How about that? Come on, Martin. Put your weight on it.
And robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote.
That's the problem.
No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in
Alabama, Letha.
With its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
No, they didn't want him to live. One of the most hated men during his lifetime. They didn't want Martin Luther King to live. Yeah, but let freedom ring. Hey, Letha, let freedom ring. Period. Period. So, ML King, I'm going to edit up drop the links in the description below. So you can you can always play it back in its entirety, but it's so much revelation, it's so much knowledge. Every sentence he said was so loaded. You can literally take it and study it for years. Now, having said that, let me at this time. You have a pleasant evening and a pleasant night. And you know what we're getting ready to go out on, right? We're going right back out on some music. So stay actively engaged. Never give up. Justice is not a one-night stand. It is a long-term commitment. So shake yourself. Don't allow yourselves to vacillate and waver back and forth. You know, right is right and wrong is wrong. What's just is just. What is unjust is unjust. What is true is true. What is a lie is a lie. The realm of reality is reality. The realm of fantasy and fictitiousnism is fictitiousnism and fallacy and fantasy. Has nothing to do with reality. We gonna let freedom ring. You have to face the reality of the situation that America did not do right and has yet to make it right for African American people. And that's the reality of the situation. The people can try to vacillate, waver, go back and forth, but that don't change the truth. And it sure enough don't change the facts. Now let me get back to this song. Something Inside So Strong is what we're going out on. Okay, how about that? And happy ML King Day. And hopefully he stirred within you with every word that he says. Action. May you be forever shaken from your passiveness. May he create in you a new nation.
Just like any other history.
So let me get back to this song. Now that I got it queued up. This was going out on Happy ML King Day. Again, a man of valor, a man of virtue, a man of faith, a man of justice, a man that many lied on and tried to create false narratives and stories on, but his legacy lives on. His words still ring true to this day. So may we forever be shaken and stirred into action that leads towards justice and stability for the next generation. Hey, boss. Boss, it would be nice if you took this beat right here and went ahead and just flipped it and made a rap for this generation. Just my perspective and opinion. You better sing, Daryl Coley. Man, Daryl Coley on them runs. Woo! All right. All right. All right. Something inside so strong. Boss Blake, the original version of that was Vanessa Bear Armstrong. And this is a version that Fred Hammond and friends got together and sang. And Daryl Coley is throwing down, by the way. Woo! That brother is on those runs like none other. Oh my goodness. All right. What a way to go out on ML King Day. But I think it would be Boss. I know you can flip this. I know you can flip it in a rap and add your other instrumentation to it. You know, the bass is there, quite naturally, the organ is there. Add some xylophones to it. Stuff like that. All right. With that being said, oh yeah, I know you can, boss. Yeah, he was blowing. All right. With that being said, everybody, enjoy ML King Day. It is officially 12:45 Eastern Standard Time where I'm at. Okay, boss. Which version do you want? I can send you. You want the original from Vanessa? I'll just put both of them in the link that you just shared. And thanks for sharing again. I'll just drop them in there. I'll just drop both of them so you can listen to both of them. All right. With that being said, everybody, enjoy your ML King and have a nice night. Bye bye, everybody. Stay vigilant.